What if everything we knew about the end of World War II was a lie? Imagine a frozen wasteland hiding a secret army where Nazi officers vanished, not in defeat, but in silence. This isn't just conspiracy theory, it's a disturbing alternate timeline buried in classified reports and whispers of a Fourth Reich rising from the ice. You're not supposed to hear this. But now, it's too late to turn back. The war had officially ended in May 1945, but deep in the icy heart of Antarctica, a different kind of battle had just begun. Hidden behind the curtain of post-war reconstruction was a secret so chilling, even the most classified Allied files refused to confirm it. The story begins in 1938, when the German expedition to Queen Maud Land, officially a scientific mission, took a darker turn. Records recovered decades later revealed the true nature of the voyage, mapping out terrain for a hidden military installation. They called it Base 211. Hidden beneath miles of ice, New Berlin was not just a refuge, it was the insurance policy for the Reich. As Nazi Germany faced inevitable collapse, a special convoy led by Admiral Karl Donitz executed Operation Valkyrie II, the exodus of hundreds of SS officers, top scientists, and advanced weapon prototypes to Antarctica. Rumors persisted that Hitler himself did not die in his Berlin bunker, but escaped aboard a U-boat disguised as a Red Cross ship, bound for the ice-covered south. After the war, something strange began to happen. In 1947, Admiral Richard Byrd led Operation High Jump, a massive military expedition to Antarctica under the guise of training. Officially, it lasted a few months. Unofficially, Byrd's private diary, leaked by a family member years later, told of a fierce engagement with aerial crafts far beyond anything we'd ever seen. The diary described silver discs attacking U.S. destroyers with precision, and aircraft that defied the laws of physics. Radar blips came and went at impossible speeds. Men went missing. Ships vanished. The operation was abruptly terminated. Byrd was recalled to Washington and never spoke publicly about what he witnessed. Throughout the 1950s, strange phenomena plagued the southern oceans. Whaling crews reported odd lights beneath the ice. Satellites captured heat signatures far too intense to be natural. In 1958, Soviet reconnaissance planes flying over Queen Maud Land vanished without a trace. The Soviets blamed the Americans. The Americans said nothing at all. Declassified CIA transcripts from 1963 referred to Himmelkraft, sky power, believed to be a secret energy source derived from early experiments by Nazi scientists with what they called Die Glock, or the bell. This bell-shaped device was said to generate anti-gravity effects and distort time. Some believed it was a myth. Others claimed it powered the saucer-shaped aircraft spotted in both wartime Europe and post-war Antarctica. A now-deceased German engineer, Ernst Malver, gave a chilling interview in 1982, smuggled out by a Chilean journalist. According to Malver, the Antarctic base was a frozen fortress of the Reich's finest minds, and that they had developed technologies that belonged not to this world, or not to this time. He claimed to have witnessed craft capable of vertical takeoff, directed energy weapons, and even primitive cloning experiments. Malver's testimony suggested that New Berlin had become a self-sustaining, isolated civilization. Cut off from the world, these exiled Nazis believed they were the last true Aryans, destined to return once the world had fallen into chaos. And chaos, they believed, was inevitable. Fast forward to 1989, a Soviet nuclear submarine patrol vanishes in the Southern Ocean. Its last transmission, a garbled distress signal mentioning unidentified vessels descending from the clouds. Moscow quietly requested a joint investigation with the United States. The request was denied. Instead, satellite blackouts over the Antarctic Circle became routine. In 1997, a joint Norwegian-Brazilian expedition discovered a massive tunnel system beneath Queen Maud Land. Radiation levels were abnormally high. Their radio contact was lost. When rescue teams arrived weeks later, all 16 members were gone. No trace. No bodies. Just gear, crushed snow, and a Geiger counter that refused to stop screaming. The world's governments began to pretend Antarctica didn't exist. In 2001, Conspiracy forums lit up after a leaked video allegedly captured by a U.S. drone showed what appeared to be a hovering disk emerging from a glacier crevasse, then disappearing into the sky. Experts called it a hoax. Still, the Pentagon initiated a silent redirection of satellite coverage away from the continent. By 2020, climate shifts began exposing previously buried regions of Antarctica. Glaciologists uncovered strange metal fragments, alloy compositions that did not match any known Earth-based manufacturing processes from the 20th century. The pieces bore symbols, not letters, and one bore a scorched iron eagle atop a swastika. Today, few speak of the lost Reich. It's dismissed as myth, a fever dream of conspiracy theorists. But scratch beneath the ice, and the secrets begin to bleed. A whistleblower within NATO, under anonymity, leaked a report in 2023 warning of energy pulses detected from the pole, rhythmic, patterned, intelligent. Satellite footage was altered, data suppressed, and even Google Earth censored specific locations with generic snow overlays. Why? What are they hiding? Some say New Berlin has evolved far beyond 1940s ideology, that they are no longer Nazis, but something colder, smarter, waiting for the world to break, so they can return. It began in the spring of 1940, when Britain stood alone against the advancing tide of Nazi conquest. France was collapsing. Norway was lost. The Luftwaffe bombed nightly. But deep in London's upper circles, an altogether different fear brewed, not of Hitler's armies, but of Winston Churchill himself. Newly appointed Prime Minister and defiant to the core, Churchill refused all peace overtures. But not everyone in Britain agreed with his stance. A powerful alliance of pro-fascist aristocrats, financiers, and high-ranking military officers believed his policies would destroy the empire. Among them stood Sir Archibald Hamilton, Lord Tavistock, and the infamous Oswald Mosley, leader of the British Union of Fascists. Documents uncovered decades later from MI5 sealed archives detail what was once considered unthinkable. Operation Lion's Reprieve, a covert plan to depose Churchill and install a government sympathetic to Nazi Germany. The plan was approved in principle during a secret meeting at Belvoir Castle, with the goal of seizing Downing Street before the year's end. The plot was rooted in the belief that Britain could survive only by securing peace with Hitler. According to a now declassified War Office memo dated July 3, 1940, the conspirators believed that continued resistance will bring the empire to ruin and usher in Bolshevism upon these isles. Germany, they argued, respected Britain's imperial tradition. The real threat, they claimed, lay to the east, in Moscow. The trigger for the coup was Operation Sea Lion, Germany's planned invasion of Britain. With the Battle of Britain raging, a coordinated campaign of misinformation was launched. British newspapers under fascist-friendly ownership began publishing defeatist rhetoric. Rumors spread that Churchill was mentally unstable and planning to flee to Canada. Meanwhile, members of the Home Guard loyal to Mosley were quietly armed and trained under the guise of civil defense. The moment came in October 1940. As German bombers ravaged London during the Blitz, Churchill was scheduled to deliver a speech in Parliament, a speech he never gave. An explosion ripped through Westminster just moments before he was to arrive. It was blamed on a stray Luftwaffe bomb, but forensic photos taken at the scene, now revealed, show no impact crater, only internal blast damage. The bomb was planted. With Churchill presumed dead, a National Emergency Council was hastily formed by senior political figures sympathetic to appeasement. The king, under immense pressure and manipulated intelligence, appointed a new government, one led by Mosley, now styled Minister-President of the British state. Britain was no longer at war. The announcement came via the BBC. A temporary armistice had been declared. German and British diplomats met in neutral Lisbon and signed the Treaty of Atlantic Concord. The terms were shocking. Britain would retain its empire, but acknowledge German dominance in Europe. In return, the Luftwaffe halted its bombing campaign, and German troops would not invade. The Union Jack still flew, but now, it flew beside the swastika on government buildings. A modified anthem echoed in the streets. God save the king, guide his peace with Germany. Mosley's regime moved fast. Dissenters were rounded up. Resistance leaders, including members of Churchill's cabinet, were detained or executed under the new National Unity Act. The press was censored. Jewish refugees were deported. Britain's once proud democracy fell into silence, its parliament now a rubber stamp for German-sanctioned directives. But Churchill was not dead. According to files recovered from the SOE, Special Operations Executive, Churchill was smuggled out of London by loyalists in the Royal Marines. Wounded and presumed dead, he was taken to Scotland, then across the North Sea to Sweden, and finally to Canada. From an undisclosed location in Ottawa, he broadcast the now legendary speech known as the Voice in Exile, urging Britons to resist, to remember who they were, and to never let the jackboot settle on English soil. His broadcasts were banned. Possession of a recording became a capital offense. Yet they spread like wildfire, smuggled in via fishing boats and hidden radios. A resistance was born. By 1942, the British Resistance Army was actively sabotaging rail lines, bombing Mosley's police stations, and assassinating collaborators. Churchill's legend only grew. He became the unseen symbol of defiance. Across the Atlantic, America was torn. Roosevelt condemned the Mosley regime but stopped short of declaring Britain an enemy. With Britain neutralized and no foothold in Europe, U.S. options dwindled. The Soviet Union bore the full weight of Hitler's Eastern fury. In 1944, following the Nazi victory at Kursk and the fall of Leningrad, the Reich extended from Brittany to the Urals. The world was breaking. But then came Operation Ember, a desperate Allied plan led by Churchill and coordinated from Canadian soil. On June 6, 1945, Allied commandos launched a daring invasion of Wales, striking at Milford Haven. At the same moment, resistance uprisings erupted in Manchester, Birmingham, and London. Royal Air Force pilots who had faked loyalty to the regime turned on their handlers. The battle for Britain was brutal. For 3 months, the country was plunged into a civil war, pitting brother against brother. Finally, in September 1945, Mosley was captured attempting to flee to Spain aboard a Luftwaffe transport. He was executed for treason. Churchill returned in a wheelchair, thinner, grayer, but victorious. Parliament was restored, and war was declared once again on the Axis. But by then, it was too late to stop the Reich's dominance of Europe. The world that emerged after was not one of peace, but of scars. Britain had survived, barely. Its empire crumbled in the following decade. Trust in democracy had been shaken to its roots. Churchill, in his final address to the nation, said, "We shall not let the torch of freedom be extinguished, even if it flickers in the wind. For though the flame may waver, it shall never die." December 5, 1941, was the day the snow bled. As the German Wehrmacht advanced on Moscow under the icy shadow of Operation Typhoon, the Soviet Union teetered on the edge of annihilation. But in this version of history, there would be no Soviet resurgence. There would be no counteroffensive. There would be no Stalin. The turning point was simple, brutal, and final. A single artillery barrage, well-timed, precisely coordinated, leveled the Kremlin's underground war room, killing Stalin instantly. His body was recovered days later from the rubble, crushed beneath tons of granite and steel. Officially, the Soviets claimed he had been moved. Internally, the Politburo panicked. Without Stalin, the cohesion of the Soviet command fractured almost overnight. General Zhukov, still fighting to rally defenses on the outskirts of Moscow, was suddenly without political support. The chain of command buckled under paranoia and confusion. Some generals attempted to seize power. Others fled eastward. Those with eyes toward survival made the ultimate betrayal. On December 10th, with German troops just 5 kilometers from Red Square, a delegation led by Lavrenti Beria and a lesser-known party official named Malenkov contacted the German High Command through neutral Swedish intermediaries. They offered a ceasefire and a surrender, not just of the city, but of the entire Western Soviet Union. Adolf Hitler, stunned by the speed of Soviet capitulation, agreed under one condition: total compliance. No guerrilla resistance. No partisan warfare. and the surrender must be public. On December 15th, under a white flag raised atop the shattered Kremlin, German officers marched into Moscow. A camera crew followed. The film would later be broadcast across occupied Europe as Der Fall Moskau, The Fall of Moscow. Beria appeared on screen with a blank, unreadable face, reading a prepared statement in broken German. The Soviet people accept the conditions of peace for the preservation of our future. Overnight, Operation Barbarossa became Operation Heimkehr, Homecoming. The Eastern Front closed. The Wehrmacht, bloodied but victorious, turned its eyes westward. The United States, having just been attacked at Pearl Harbor, now faced a terrifying reality. Europe and most of Asia were under Axis control. With the Soviet Union dissolved and China surrounded, Japan faced no opposition on the continent. Germany and Japan began coordinating more aggressively, though still divided by geography and culture. Moscow became a trophy city. Red Square was paved anew, adorned with flags of the Reich. Lenin's mausoleum was demolished in a symbolic gesture. In its place, the Platz der Ordnung, Square of Order, was constructed, featuring a black marble statue of a Roman eagle clutching a broken sickle. In the months that followed, resistance in the east flared but was swiftly extinguished. With the NKVD decapitated and the Communist Party outlawed, cells in Kiev, Smolensk, and Stalingrad were hunted down by the newly formed Ostsicherheitskorps, made up of local collaborators and SS officers. Beria himself was installed as Reichsverwalter Ost, governor of the Eastern Territories. He ruled for 2 years before disappearing under mysterious circumstances. What followed was the largest population transfer in human history. Millions of Slavs, Jews, and political prisoners were deported eastward into Siberia, into what the Reich called Zone Null, the Null Zone, a region unmarked on any map, governed only by death. The Ukrainian breadbasket was seized for the Reich. Russian children were taken, Germanized, and re-educated in schools that taught them to forget their ancestry. Meanwhile, Hitler declared victory not just militarily, but ideologically. Europe had been reshaped. The Soviet experiment, the communist dream, had died in the snow. But not everyone agreed. A remnant faction of the Red Army, calling themselves the Crimson Dawn, regrouped in the Ural Mountains. Led by a fiery young general named Alexei Molchanov, they launched a series of high-profile raids on supply lines and railways. Their most audacious act came in 1943, when they infiltrated the heavily fortified Moscow Reichstag and detonated an explosive beneath the Bronze Eagle monument. The blast was caught on film by a German news crew and quickly censored, but not before it spread across underground networks in Prague, Warsaw, and Paris. Even in death, Stalin's image became a rallying point. Grainy photos of his frozen body, secretly smuggled from the Kremlin ruins by a janitor, were reprinted on leaflets dropped by American bombers over occupied Eastern Europe. The text read, *, he died in the fire. You live in the ashes. Rise. *. But Hitler was not idle. With the Eastern Front no longer a drain on manpower and resources, Germany began a renewed push into the Middle East and Africa. The oil fields of Baku and Tehran were captured. British resistance in North Africa crumbled. India, surrounded, erupted into rebellion, fueled by Axis propaganda promising freedom from the empire. By 1946, the world had changed beyond recognition. Washington stood isolated. Japan dominated the Pacific. Germany held the Eurasian continent in its iron grip. The world was split not between democracy and fascism, but between submission and resistance. In the absence of the USSR, nuclear development slowed. The Manhattan Project, under political pressure and fear of sabotage, fell behind schedule. The first American test did not occur until 1947. By then, German scientists had produced their own prototype, a dirty fission bomb detonated in the Kazakh desert, wiping out a rogue Crimson Dawn encampment. But there was no grand nuclear war. Not yet. Instead, the Reich ruled with silence, surveillance, and slow suffocation. Culture was rewritten. Language was cleansed. Maps redrawn. Moscow, now known as New Russland, became the capital of the Reich's eastern district, patrolled by drones and armored zeppelins. Dissent was a whisper. Hope, a memo. July 16, 1945. The desert shook. A blinding light tore open the sky at Alamogordo, New Mexico. The world's first atomic bomb had just been detonated, or so the world believed. In this alternate chapter of history, the Manhattan Project was never a secret to Nazi Germany. The truth was far more terrifying. It had been fed to them, piece by piece, blueprint by blueprint, by the most powerful man in the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The conspiracy began with a man named Erich Jan Hanussen, a known occultist and Hitler's early confidant, who vanished mysteriously in 1933. Many believed he was murdered by the Nazis. In reality, Hanussen had been smuggled into the United States by American industrialists sympathetic to fascism. There, he embedded himself within elite circles and manipulated the minds of politicians and financiers. Among them, the Roosevelt family. In private journals later uncovered by a whistleblower in 1973, FDR described dreams of fire, visions of global unity, and a new order forged in lightning. Handwriting analysis confirmed the authenticity. These entries coincided with key moments in U.S. foreign policy, especially Roosevelt's ambiguous stance toward early Nazi aggression. But the true betrayal came in 1942. The Manhattan Project, a scientific endeavor shrouded in secrecy, was compromised from the start. Unbeknownst to General Groves, several high-ranking physicists, most notably Dr. Otto Braun, an Austrian émigré, were secretly reporting back to Berlin through encoded messages in physics journals. Their courier? A White House liaison with direct access to Roosevelt. In 1943, the OSS intercepted a strange transmission from Lisbon to Munich. It referenced a device called Schattenstern, Shadow Star. American cryptographers dismissed it as an irrelevant code phrase. Only later did they realize it was Germany's parallel nuclear program, suddenly and inexplicably accelerated. Back in Washington, Roosevelt began pushing for diplomatic talks with Germany, even as the war escalated. He argued internally that a post-war world will require alignment of power, not annihilation. Cabinet members grew concerned, especially Secretary of State Cordell Hull, who privately referred to FDR as possessed by something other than reason. The turning point came in January 1945, when Hitler, despite being cornered on all sides, broadcast a chilling message: "The Reich has been touched by the fire of the gods. Soon, the skies will answer." A month later, a modified V-2 rocket exploded 30 miles outside of Moscow. The resulting shockwave flattened 5 square kilometers. Soviet officials initially claimed it was a fuel explosion, but American reconnaissance photos revealed radiation burns unlike anything seen before. The Nazis had a bomb, and it had Roosevelt's fingerprints on it. Desperate to contain the fallout, both literal and political, Roosevelt convened a secret meeting at Camp David with key generals, including Eisenhower and Patton. He proposed a ceasefire with Germany to redirect human evolution toward cooperative dominion. Patton, never a man for subtlety, accused him of treason to his face. Hours later, Patton's plane crashed en route to New York. The official cause: mechanical failure. Then came April 12, 1945. In our timeline, Roosevelt died of a cerebral hemorrhage. But in this reality, the cause was different. Cyanide, slipped into his afternoon tea by a Secret Service agent acting under Vice President Harry Truman's direct orders. The cover story of natural death held. Few questioned it. But Truman knew the truth, and acted fast. Within days, half the Manhattan Project was relocated. German sympathizers were quietly detained. Operation Eclipse, the final push into Germany, was accelerated. American troops were ordered to seize all nuclear-related facilities with deadly force. The objective was no longer just victory, it was containment. On May 2, 1945, American paratroopers stormed the Harz Mountains, uncovering the underground facility known as Die Glaskammer, the glass chamber. Inside, they found remnants of a reactor, hundreds of dead scientists, and evidence of 2 additional bombs, both missing. The nightmare was far from over. One of the stolen bombs was traced to the Canary Islands, where a rogue SS faction attempted to launch it toward New York via a retrofitted U-boat. The other vanished completely, rumored to have been taken to Argentina along with a handful of high-ranking Nazi officers. Truman never revealed the truth. The American public mourned Roosevelt as a hero, the man who guided them through the Depression and most of the war. But inside the new president's private vault lay a letter, handwritten by FDR himself, never sent. History will not remember what I tried to do, only that I failed. Let them call it treason. In time, they will understand. But time never offered understanding, only silence. The second bomb was never found. But in 1952, a remote area of Patagonia experienced what local shepherds called a sunrise that sang. No seismic activity, no crater, just scorched earth and radiation sickness in animals for miles. To this day, the United States government maintains Roosevelt's legacy with quiet reverence. His name is etched into libraries, ships, highways. The public myth stands tall. But beneath the National Archives lies a sealed chamber. Inside, locked in lead-lined boxes, are reels of footage, decoded messages, and a fragment of uranium casing marked with a swastika and an American eagle. Sometimes, history is a story told by survivors. And sometimes, it's a story rewritten by the guilty. August 9, 1945. Nagasaki burned. But in this version of history, there was no pause, no surrender, no emperor's voice across the radio waves. Instead, there was silence, followed by rage. The Japanese High Command, shocked by the annihilation of Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, believed a third bomb was impossible. The Americans surely didn't have another. But they did. It was called Trinity's Echo. Unknown to most even within the Manhattan Project, a third uranium bomb had been prepared, hurriedly assembled using scraps from Oak Ridge and Los Alamos. It was more unstable, less tested, and deadly in ways its creators didn't fully understand. The scientists called it unkind child. Military command called it necessary. President Truman, under immense pressure after the Soviets had declared war on Japan and launched a rapid invasion of Manchuria, believed a final act of devastation could end the war once and for all. No room for negotiation, no face-saving surrender. Only ash. The target, Tokyo. At 1:22 a.m. on August 11, 1945, a lone B-29 bomber, Old Judgment, pierced the Pacific darkness under radar silence. Unlike Enola Gay and Boxcar, Old Judgment carried no markings. The crew had no identifying tags. Their orders were clear: fly low, drop fast, vanish. At 2:44 a.m., the heart of Tokyo turned to sun. The detonation vaporized the Imperial Palace and most of Chiyoda Ward. Fires engulfed the surrounding districts. 500,000 people perished in seconds. Those on the fringes, blinded, burned, screaming, ran toward the rivers, which boiled. Eyewitnesses in Yokohama described the sky as bleeding glass. The emperor's body was never recovered. The Japanese government ceased to exist. By morning, the nation was not surrendered, it was leaderless. The military fractured. Some factions begged for peace. Others declared vengeance. A group of radical officers seized a broadcasting station in Kyoto and called for a holy war against the demon Americans. Others committed seppuku in the ruins of temples. The old order was gone. What remained was chaos. The Americans had planned for a surrender. They had not planned for anarchy. Operation Downfall, the proposed invasion of Japan, was shelved. Not out of mercy, but fear. There was no one to surrender. No flag to lower. Japan had become a nuclear wilderness, its people leaderless, starving, traumatized. Thousands fled into forests and mountains, forming ghost societies. Others built shrines at Ground Zero, worshipping the explosion as divine retribution. American occupation began weeks later, but Tokyo was off-limits. The radiation was still lethal. Recon planes reported strange phenomena: animals with burns but no wounds, metallic rain, entire neighborhoods preserved in silhouette. Troops sent in with lead suits returned coughing blood. Many never came back. The bomb had not simply destroyed Tokyo. It had cursed it. Among the scattered survivors was a boy named Akihiko, age 13, who would later become known as the child without a shadow. Found wandering the outskirts of the city wearing a charred school uniform, his body showed no injuries, but his pupils were permanently dilated, and he did not speak. Only in 1952 did he utter his first words, asterisk, "The sky was watching." Asterisk. In the years that followed, Tokyo was fenced off, its ruins visible only from high-altitude spy planes. It became known as Zone 3, a classified area under joint American-Soviet observation. No maps marked it. No flights crossed it. Inside, the rubble sat untouched, the outlines of vaporized civilians still scorched into the pavement. Meanwhile, Japan became a divided land. The North, under Soviet influence, transformed into a harsh collectivist zone centered around Sapporo. The South, governed by American forces from Osaka, became a tightly controlled protectorate. The old culture was suppressed, language, flags, even Shinto rituals banned for fear of resurgence. But rumors persisted, of glowing trees in the Tokyo ruins, of strange lights dancing in the fog, of survivors who could no longer die. In 1959, a Japanese-American physicist, Dr. Naomi Fujikawa, led an unauthorized expedition into Zone 3. What she found was never made public, but her final transmission included a phrase that chilled every ear that heard it. The bomb did not end the war. It rewrote the human genome. Documents from the Pentagon, declassified decades later, revealed a project called Echelon Sun, a joint US-Soviet initiative to monitor Tokyo's lingering radiation patterns. What they discovered was inexplicable. The zone wasn't decaying. It was growing. Slowly, year by year, the affected area expanded, by millimeters at first, then by meters. By 1970, the center of Tokyo glowed faintly from orbit. The ruins emitted low-frequency hums, identical to the resonance patterns of human brainwaves. No technology functioned inside the zone. Photographs came out blank. Animals that wandered in never left. Trees grew upside down. The third bomb had birthed not just destruction, but a permanent anomaly. ASC. A colony that should never have existed. Technology decades ahead of its time. And a war that may never have truly ended. If the last shadows of the Reich are still out there, what else is buried beneath the ice? Some truths were never meant to surface. And if they do, we may not survive what follows. The next question isn't, what if? It's, what now?